feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm a narcissist or something, but I feel like the readings keep speaking to me personally. Like the last 3 weeks as a new priest, as a new pastor, they all seem to be speaking about what it is like, what it takes to be a priest. We heard 3 weeks ago about what it means to be a prophet and how to do that, and that the idea that there are good prophets and bad ones. And last week we heard a similar message. And this week we have the very powerful reading from the Old Testament talking about bad shepherds. And the idea, God is saying through a prophet, woe to you. Woe to you. And that's a word that always gets my attention. Like, whoa. Okay. Woe to you, bad shepherds, those of you who lead people astray. And certainly one image of a priest is a prophet. Another image of a priest very frequently is a shepherd. A priest is asked to care for people who he has been assigned to by the bishop. And so this warning, I think, then still applies. And God's command or God's warning to the shepherds, woe to you, shepherds, woe to you, priests, who lead people astray, who have led people astray. And certainly I think we have something, not just like recently, but over the last 30 or 40 years in our Catholic Church, where some priests have done precisely that, have led people astray. And so, lots of ways that's happened, but a very real way that we've seen that on a pretty big scale is actually something that the bishops are trying to correct. And this week they're having something called Natural Family Planning Awareness Week. Now, I know none of you probably knew that. You probably didn't have that marked on your calendar. No one wished me happy Natural Family Planning Awareness Week when I came in, or when they came in tonight. So I think that most of you probably didn't know that it was, and I wouldn't have known if I didn't get an email 2 weeks ago either. But anyway, the United States bishops have asked us this week in a special way to focus on natural family planning and what it is, and really natural family planning is the bishop's response, or is the church's response to the culture of artificial contraception, artificial birth control. And that is something that has happened over the last 30 or 40 years, where many priests, many of those who are asked to shepherd people, did not take a stand or did not properly shepherd people, maybe even led people astray and said, don't worry about it, the church is just uptight. The church is just behind the times, Natural family planning, really quickly, is again the Catholic alternative to this culture of artificial contraception and so forth. So what is it? What is natural family planning? Well, it basically is, it involves a process whereby it's an encouragement for husbands and wives to be in discernment with God, in prayer, constantly sort of asking God, Lord, ought we be open to new life? Should we be open to new life right now in our marriage? Are we in a position where we should be receiving, or at least be open to receiving, a new child through our marriage? And, husband and wife should be spending time in prayer about that, talking with each other and conversing. And if they feel like through prayer that they are not in a position, or that God is somehow not calling them at that moment to be open to receiving new life, or at least to try and maybe wait for a bit until receiving new life into their home, then there's a period of abstinence there, where husband and wife, especially during the most fertile time of a woman's cycle, they abstain. And so it's this connection with, if we're going to have marital relations with one another, then we ought to be open to life. And if we're feeling like God's calling us not in that direction at the moment, then we abstain, because the church says those two things cannot be separated from one another. The marital act and the openness to life cannot be separated from each other. They just can't. And when we do that, we tear apart something that God never meant to be apart. And so we cause a lot of damage, not just to our own relationship with God, but within the marriage itself. There can be strain, and certainly we also can do harm to the larger society, by not building up the body of Christ and not bringing into the world children that God wills us to be doing that for. So certainly that is what the church holds up as sort of this alternative. And so the bishops are saying, look, we have had some priests and shepherds mislead us, or maybe not do as good a job. Maybe we all have not done as good of a job at becoming aware of this as we could. And so this week, the church is asking us, the bishops are asking us, hey, let's focus on this and let's learn a little bit about it. Let's prepare ourselves a little bit about it. Some people will say, I hear this, some people ask this question, it's not like a ton of people, but I get this, sometimes people say, well, if contraception, artificial birth control, if that is not having children, and natural family planning often leads to people not having children, what's the difference? And I always say, well, if there is no difference, then you would have no problem practicing natural family planning. And then people say, but wait, there's a difference. And I said, exactly. That's what we were saying. Of course there's a difference. Anybody that has ever fasted from anything for any period of time knows there's a difference between constantly indulging in something and not, and fasting and having to stand down or step aside for a day or two from something like that. And so there is, of course, a difference. Natural family planning is highly effective. It actually has a way higher percentage of effectiveness than contraception. We don't hear that very often from those who are out championing contraception and artificial birth control. They don't tell you they're not very much talking about the failure rates that the pill has, that condoms have, whatever it may be. There's a failure rate involved. And natural family planning is actually much higher in its percentage of effectiveness. It's in the 99th percentile of being effective at actually, if a couple is discerning not having a child at that moment, of actually having that happen. And so, one of the problems though when you say that is okay, so if you go to like parishes or Catholics, typically the people that are out speaking about natural family planning, like, most of the parishes where I've been, will have like a marriage preparation program. And so there's always this family that speaks about natural family planning. They're always the family that has like 900 kids. And so it scares everyone, it scares people away because they're like, well, if natural family planning works, why do you have 900 kids? Like my mom and dad were actually, they do a lot of talking about natural family planning to couples and stuff, and have provided a lot of witness to people over the years. And of course I know that the fear, these picture this young couple and they're like, oh yeah, trust us, it works, It's like, but we've had 11 kids. And I think the reason that's the case is because I think what often happens with natural family planning is that couples think, gosh, I'm not really sure right now we should be open to life. I'm not really sure God's calling us to that. I don't know if we can afford it. I don't know if we can afford another child right now, or if things are tight. Well, what happens a lot of times is if you're in natural family planning, if you're practicing natural family planning, then what often happens is that it's like, day 2 and the husband and wife are abstaining and they start asking themselves, maybe we can afford another child. Maybe God is calling us to be open to this. And maybe we're a little bit selfish in saying that, gosh, it would just be too hard right now. And so I think a lot of times it is the case that natural family planning does oftentimes lead to bigger families, but just because the husband and wife are talking about it and are actually in communication. The divorce rate for couples who are using natural family planning is below 5%. Below 5%, whereas the national average obviously is at, or sometimes some people are even saying it's above now, 50%. So couples who are using natural family planning are 10 times less likely to get divorced. And what's the big reason people always get divorced? Not communicating. What does natural family planning force a couple to do? Communicate. And so the church's wisdom in all of this just shines through in its ability to foster communication, to make sure that husband and wife are not falling into the mortal sin of using artificial contraception or artificial birth control. And there's just so many benefits to it. It keeps us from sin. It also has a positive effect on marriages and on relationships and on on our whole society. And, really, really quickly then, one of the things then that we should probably, that I would really highly encourage you to do during Natural Family Planning Awareness Week, that's a mouthful. Don't even worry about trying to come up with like a NFP, AW, just don't do it. Anyway, Natural Family Planning Awareness Week, what should we be doing? One of the things I'd really encourage us to do is to look at the encyclical Humanae Vitae. You don't have to read the whole thing, but it is pretty short actually. But just look at an online summary. That is one of the most prophetic documents of all time, one of the most predictive documents, future-telling documents that the church has ever had. What happened, it was in 1968. Most of the people in the world thought the Catholic Church is going to change its position on artificial birth control and say, okay, now we're in favor of this. It's fine in certain circumstances or whatever. And what happened, Pope Paul VI came out with this document in 1968 and said, no, in fact, we're going to continue what we've always taught as Catholics, what we've always believed, that artificial birth control is a serious sin and a grave sin and a mortal sin, and that natural family planning is the way to go about regulating and spacing births in a proper and holy way. And again, then that sets off this firestorm that frankly we're still dealing with in our church. It still rips communities apart. Some people still, in certain places, if you even mention the word Humanae Vitae or the words, or you start talking about contraception from the pulpit, they'll leave, or they'll get mad, or they'll send the hate mail to the priest or whatever. It still is a very sensitive subject, and something that, again, I think a lot of it had to do with a lot of priests who were asked to shepherd people through it, instead kind of teaching their own doctrines, maybe telling people, don't listen to the church, it's old and archaic. And so we have, again, this week to try and do that. So again, I have a talk online if you want to look at it. There's a lot of other better things than that online too. You can find resources or contact me and I can share stuff with you. There's lots of great stuff. But again, we need to become aware of that. And I'll end with this. Here's why this is so important for us. Because a lot of people say, okay, well, great homily, Father, to the 10% of us who are married right now and are actually, in that window where we're thinking about having children. What about the rest of us? Well, the rest of us are involved too, and here's why. In a matter of months, the Catholic Church is going to be back in the spotlight, and it's specifically its teaching on contraception and artificial birth control is going to be in the national media, front and center, and here's why. If you've been following along with the process, President Obama's health care package was upheld by the Supreme Court. And so now that has cleared the way for the Catholics and the whole HHS mandate and all that. Our lawsuits, the Catholic institutions' lawsuits, will be in the Supreme Court in a matter of months, taking center stage. And everyone is going to be asked, oh, you're Catholic? What do you crazy Catholics believe about contraception again? I hear it in the news that so people at work and your friends and your family from other, out of town and everything, they're going to say, hey, you're Catholic, and they're going to be open to, and there's going to be a window where you, if you know your stuff, can actually evangelize them and talk to them and say, yeah, well, this is what we teach. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but we actually have this thing called natural family planning, and it's actually more effective than contraception at helping space births. Did you know that? And did you know the divorce rate for natural family planning is less than 5%? It's all going to be how we do it too. If we hit the streets and we're just, punching people in the face and saying, well, you better not use contraception. Well, of course they're going to run the other way. But we're going to have this window of opportunity where everyone is going to be asking us, and they're going to be open. Their hearts are going to be open, and they're going to want to know what we teach and why, and what we hold up as the alternative. So the question is going to be, are we going to be ready for that? Are we going to make ourselves aware of natural family planning? Are we going to know Humanae Vitae? Are we going to know what it teaches and the why? Or are we going to remain ignorant, and when people ask us questions, we're not going to have an answer? And I'll end with this too. I know I said I was going to end with the last thing, but I promise. This is the real end. The readings are speaking to shepherds, right? And we think, okay, yeah, priests, prophets, and shepherds, all that. So the reading, but I'm not a shepherd. right? Maybe we're thinking out here, the average person in the pew, I'm not a shepherd. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. Yes, God has asked me to shepherd this community of Annunciation Catholic Church in Brazil and to be a shepherd for the entire town. But you also have been asked to shepherd people, and you will be asked in the coming months in a special way to shepherd people, to lead people. Jesus said when he looked on them, they were like sheep without a shepherd. And what is his response? He taught them many things. And that's going to be our task. That's what God's going to ask us. There are a lot of people out there who are like sheep without a shepherd. And a lot of them, I will not have an opportunity to minister. I don't know them. I don't work with them. I won't see them on a daily basis like you will. The question for you is also, it's not just priests who can be a good shepherd or a bad shepherd. It's all of us. And again, that opportunity to shepherd is going to be in front of us in a very real way. Will we take advantage and learn our stuff, or will we remain in ignorance?